Synnergist is a sci-fi horror mystery point-and-click adventure game and wearing a light blue button-up with khakis simulator. It was developed by Vicarious Visions and published by 21st Century Entertainment in 1996. Oddly, it was released in Germany with the subtitle Der Blaue Staub, or The Blue Dust. If you've never crossed paths with this game, there are some barriers to entry. In order to remember it, you have to be old as fuck! Furthermore, the game only received a DOS version, and even though ads for it appeared in that most odorous and depraved of publications, US gaming magazines, it was never actually released in the US. 21st Century was a primarily pinball-focused, UK-based publisher that probably didn't know what to do with a violent adult adventure game made by a bunch of New York kids. Hey, forget about it. Vicarious Visions was created by two hobbyist brothers in their parents' basement named Guha and Kartik Bala. It's a studio that has since had their name stamped on a wide variety of products, with very little linking them all together. In the mid to late 2000s, they were a developer that was sort of unavoidable, or I guess successful would be the less cynical way of phrasing it, doling out a wide spray of media tie-in games and handheld games that didn't take off in earnest until they started porting the Guitar Hero franchise to Nintendo consoles. Because of this, in my eyes, it does seem like it was a company without much of a distinct creative voice, rather a company that was able to cleverly bend shape in order to maintain their place as a staple in the casual gaming space. There's a ton of interviews and footage with the Bala boys, and I'll admit, their personal success story is impressive, and they seem like they genuinely enjoy being in the game business. They've failed enough times to become quite savvy as far as which projects to hitch their wagon to.
So we're really excited about the Wii U as a platform in general.
But for me, I'm of course more intrigued by the whimsical ambition of a creator that has no idea what they're doing. I like to see fellers just ruining their finances, dragging down others to make something big, magical, and dumb. Not to diminish their undeniable success in the industry, but, you know, they made a lot of shit I don't care about.
We made a bunch of games.
And then met much the same fate as just about any studio that ever made anything interesting. They got bought out by Activision, and when Activision merged with Blizzard, they were renamed Blizzard Albany. Once Vicarious Visions was scraped off the Office directory, Guha and Kartik had left and already started over as a new studio called Villan. All this to say, this journey began with a bunch of teenagers putting themselves into debt to make a funny little point-and-click game about Doctor Who. But that didn't work out, so they made something else. It wasn't until the last few years that interest in the game resurfaced and an effort was made, particularly by one Australian creator named Rizolka, to learn more about the circumstances that led to Synnergist's creation and the odd secrets planted within it. This culminated in an illuminating interview with Kartik, where he dug out some relics from his first game's production, reminiscing over documents he hadn't looked at in decades. And it's kind of sweet and worth a watch. Also, brave of him. I imagine if you sorted through some of my old drawings and writing, it would just be all just murder. One of the games that sparked the inception of Synnergist was 1989's Mean Streets, a point-and-click adventure game using photographic elements interspersed with digital art that was itself tapping into the noir-tinged cyber dystopia that the film Blade Runner proposed. A hard-boiled detective just trying to make some credits in a mildly futuristic shit world. Another was 1990's Countdown, a more traditional third-person point-and-click title about a CIA agent with amnesia that similarly incorporated live-action elements and was marketed to a more mature audience. At the age of 15, Kartik wanted to make a game, with next to no knowledge about how one would go about doing that, and in an age when the internet was in its infancy. After befriending a man who built sound cards for PCs, he would disclose his dream of making a Doctor Who themed adventure game. Acting as a mentor of sorts, this person would give Kartik books on programming as well as animation software, and even arrange a meeting with a publisher so he and his brother could pitch their Doctor Who game. It was only here, dressed in his father's suit, being driven to an office by a strange man that invited him into his basement, that he realized he needed a name for a company and quickly decided on Vicarious Visions, as it contained a word he had recently misspelled on a test in school. It's a good story. It's a story you should tell at every available opportunity.
It was called Vicarious Visions because
my brother had spelled vicarious wrong on his spelling list the prior week.
And I got it wrong. How about Vicarious Visions?
Even after writing a letter to the BBC asking if they could license Doctor Who, it quickly became clear that they were better off coming up with their own idea, which is like the opposite logic of how games work now. So, over spring break 1991, the brothers and a group of friends came up with a rough draft that would become Synnergist. After a couple years of learning the technology, making animation tests and demos, they hit a wall and realized they would need a game engine. What followed was a rather bold play, a series of actions that seem utterly alien and bizarre in the present year of 2000. In 1993, Kartik was big into the game Martian Memorandum, the follow-up to Mean Streets. So simply wanting this game to be of the same quality as Martian Memorandum, he saw in the credits that the lead designer was Brent Erickson. So he made a telephone call to Access Software, the developers of Martian Memorandum, and asked to speak with Brent Erickson. Unfortunately, by then Erickson had left the company, so not seeing this as a dead end, Kartik asked for Brent's home phone number, and they just gave it to him. So he then called this guy at home, and he answered it, and held a conversation with him. He asked if they could use his engine, and he was like, yeah, go for it. Also, I will get on a plane and fly to your location and hand it to you, and then spend a day teaching you how to use it. Small child that I do not know. In 1994, after these two acts of kindness from different nerds that saw themselves in this plucky, bright-eyed gamer, 21st Century would fund the production of Synnergist, and its dev team would forego college and day jobs for 2 years to ship the thing. In Kartik's own words, the release of Synnergist was anticlimactic. It was not met with universal acclaim, nor showered with awards. In fact, it would be met by very few. Most of the game's press and reviews would result from the game's German version. The September 96 issue of PC Joker gives a pretty average write-up, concluding that Synnergist is a densely told and at times quite entertaining puzzle game, but as such, it is extremely unsuitable for fans of straightforward gameplay. Power Play would compliment the game's script, calling it complex and challenging, but ultimately gave it a 40 out of 100 due to its simplistic and outdated graphic style. One of the only English reviews that are easily available came from Coming Soon magazine, and in another bizarre, unrepeatable circumstance, the author says it's a pretty good game, but sometimes you can get stuck in certain areas, and if that happens, there are some email addresses in the manual belonging to the folks that made it, and they are willing to give you a helping hand if you get stuck. If you enjoy mystery solving and a good storyline, then think about giving Synnergist a try. Additionally bizarre, this one interview also included the only mention of a sort of last-minute makeshift contest. Apparently, a series of Easter eggs were cleverly hidden such that, when found in the correct order, they would reveal what Synnergist means, and a limited number of people could email the team to receive a copy of the Synnergist Design Bible, a delightfully devilish artist's flourish suggested by the game's lead programmer Aaron. This information was apparently kept from 21st Century Entertainment and even the rest of the dev team aside from Kartik and Aaron. Unfortunately, it seems it was also just hidden from anyone that ever played it, because it wasn't until recently that someone decided to tear the game apart, bypassing the esoteric string of moon logic and of-era pop culture references that housed this secret content.
So I couldn't find the Bible.
Synnergist continues to elude new understanding and new fandom, as it's at the time of my writing, abandonware. 21st Century Entertainment would not be allotted much time with the century that was its namesake.
And it was kind of partly our fault.
The day we finished the project and it was released to the market, the publisher that we were working with, was a UK-based publisher, stopped returning our phone calls.
And now this home movie of a video game, this teenage passion project that made its way to European shelves on a wing and a prayer, stands as a monument to what one can accomplish if they set their mind to it and they have their hero's phone number and home address. Synnergist doesn't stray too far from its inspirations, and is glaringly of its era. It's a little bit cyberpunk, it's a little bit dark, it's a little political, yet finding plenty of time for irreverence. But it expresses these concepts rather confidently. When I played similar games that incorporate live-action elements, there was, and to some extent continues to be, this air of mystery to their creation. I don't quite understand what makes them look and sound the way they do, but I can tell when it's missing the mark, when it's awkward or amateurish, or when they they are half-assing, trying to find a shortcut to accomplish something complicated. I like to think my eyes are attuned to FMV schlock, enough that I can immediately recognize the level of quality I'm in for. But this one was strangely difficult to read. For an entry in this oft-maligned, mixed media period of adventure games, it seems so sure of its ideas that I would have never guessed it was written by a bunch of smelly boys over their summer break. This game is set in the distant, unknowable future of 2010 in the fictional city of New Aris, and concerns a struggling journalist named Tim Machin. A couple years ago, he broke a huge story concerning corruption within the New Aris Police Department, a gig that scored him several job offers from reputable publications. Too bad he had already signed a 5-year contract to work at a shit-tier tabloid called the New Aris Chronicle, where his investigative aspirations are stomped on by his scumbag editor Hallmags. Instead of casting a spotlight on the city's seedy underbelly, he's forced to toil away on puff pieces and restaurant reviews. In the opening, he's being chewed out by Hallmags for not finishing his review of a restaurant called Skyline, a levitating technological marvel that is so expensive and exclusive that a credit check is required before you can even step foot in the elevator. On top of this, Tim is instructed to interview a wealthy entrepreneur named Victor Ambrose. Ambrose recently instituted a free psychiatric hospital following a number of miscellaneous charitable acts, which taps into a recurring theme that very strangely acts as a wraparound to the plot of Synnergist, the theme of mental illness and exploitation of disabled people, a not uncommon topic broached by games from this era. It's one of those things that is a clearer minefield now, but at the time was just a device to turn your already dark story a shade darker. So even when they think they're being an ally, the dressing around it can seem pretty callous. Rest assured, there are a number of terms used in this game that have fallen under the euphemism treadmill. To regretfully quote a Canadian intellectual, read probable racist. This thread is actually the first thing you see when booting up the game. A mad scientist of sorts straps a distressed boy named Johnny to some kind of barbaric electroshock device and proceeds to joyously hit the lever. Tim heads over to Ambrose's office to conduct the interview, and it's very normal.
But excuse me for a moment while I go wipe my hands. I was feeding my pets.
I feel like if his pet was a normal pet, he would have said what kind of pet it was. Despite looking like an 18-year-old with painted-on facial hair, Ambrose is very villain-coded. He speaks really philosophically about his aspirations and the reasons for his philanthropy. Everything he says is a rehearsed line that would make a decent pull quote.
Ghettos are a lonely void, Mr. Machin. You reach out for that drive felt from the human spirit, and when none is to be found, you withdraw, afraid to feel the emptiness, the cold.
Despite hiding an exposition dump within the game's code, what Synnergist is trying to shape here isn't that hard to keep up with. It's just a level of thought you wouldn't expect from a point-and-click game made by a bunch of kids. There is actually a great deal of really descriptive and creative writing, especially through the narration when you click around on decorative elements of the environment.
This gadget looks more like a wastebasket than a computer, but since it controls who enters the elevator, it does, in a sense, filter out the trash.
You'll look at a game like Pajama Sam, and everything is an opportunity for like an inanimate object to come to life and zip around and fart. Everything in Synnergist is an opportunity for flavor text.
It offers you a drink, but you decline.
Ambrose kind of talks around Tim's statements about the city's wealth disparity and the inaction in helping the homeless. He simply abhors the wasted potential of society's outcasts and wants to see them reach that potential, whatever that may be. Could be potential doctors and lawyers or potential dog food, emphasizing that these struggles exist in cycles.
Everything runs in cycles, Mr. Machin. For many years, the government took a very conservative stance. And it swung towards liberal.
That's not my understanding. Something that even when said here seems to be underlined in the script, making the marble phoenix and abundance of infinity symbols out in the lobby seem all the more conspicuous.
Cycles, Mr. Machin. Be they fashion or poverty, they are always present.
Back at the newspaper, Tim attempts to write up his article, but finds a message left for him from his Nick, the guy that gave him the police corruption tip that earned him his stripes. He's got something big and wants to meet at a nearby park. A good deal of thought was put into the setting of New Aris and its unique interpretation of a dystopian future. It's a world where the 90s were just kind of frozen in amber, and then a sort of failing retro-futuristic layer was just dropped on top of it. Like humanity waltzed into the future with unearned confidence, building Akira motorcycles and levitating couches before realizing that, what was wrong with the old couch? The one in the New Aris Chronicle bullpen now sits propped up with phone book legs. Never noticed how stanced up my man is. He's about to take flight. The clashing of old and new, yet still very old tech is quite charming. You still have pagers, phone booths, and subway cars, but also video phones and holograms and other assorted futuristic novelties. It being set slightly in the future isn't even necessary for the story it wants to tell, it's just a fun bit of seasoning that makes the game more memorable and more jank, and that kind of feeds into each other for a lot of games. On the ride over to the park, Tim reminisces about the events that led to his partnership with Nick. He had hired Tim to investigate his ex-wife and find proof of her infidelity. In return, Nick would do whatever it was that he does, which sees him stumble into hot scoops. I mean, either way, it's good to have friends, you know. At my age, it's rare that you build a connection with anyone, so even though the terms they met on might be strange. Pretty much every major event in the game is followed by a Subway Thoughts cutscene, where Tim internally mulls over the events of the game so far, which I found to be a cute, diegetic way of keeping details of the plot fresh in your mind, as well as peering into the thought process of our protagonist. His passive pondering does seem much more lucid and coherent than mine does when I'm taking public transportation in a sketchy part of town.
Me hungry. We want foodies. What eat? Burrito? That lady looks kind of spooky. Hope she's not a mind reader. Now that would be embarrassing. In case you can read my mind, lady, I'm sorry. Well, hey, look, I've been going through a lot lately. I just moved. Plus, look how small I am. What am I doing? There's no way this lady is a mind reader. Nah, she doesn't look like she has the gift. The shinin. Unless you do.
If you'd like to experience this game's plot on your own, feel free to skip to this time, otherwise choose the option that benefits me the most. Out of watching more or less of the video, more is encouraged, despite how often I may dissuade you by—
Scanning.
What's that, boy? Did you pick up some ghostly activity with your sensors? Well, what do you see, boy?
Why are you talking to me like that?
Like what?
You are talking to me in a tone that suggests I am a fool.
Oh, I just figured like you're kind of a dog, so
Speak to me like I'm some kind of Nimrod.
Look, I'm sorry you got upset.
I am not upset.
Oh, I'm sorry you're having trouble describing your feelings.
You're still doing it.
Alright. Fine. Well, did your scan turn up any ghosts?
Yes, like 3 of them.
After letting Nick's violent, animalistic, mauling death sink in,
Nick?
my guy processes death the same way I contemplate which salsa to pick at a hot bar. Maybe red? We're given another vision, a flashback I'm assuming due to it depicting the period of time where there weren't color in nothing. Johnny, who we saw getting electroshock treatment, asks what Dr. Marlin did to Ricky, and a nurse consoles him, saying that nothing will happen to him if he doesn't get involved. Some kind of high school theater kid fresh out of a performance of Grease is hiding in the bushes nearby, and Tim roughs him up, assuming that he was responsible for Nick's murder, despite clearly being ill-equipped to rip a dude to shreds. He eventually admits that he pilfered a wallet off the corpse and surrenders it.
I'm telling you, man. That's all there is to it. Somebody had it in for your friend.
This is one of a few scenarios where we have to assume Tim is doing something badass, despite everything he does contradicting that. Like, I guess he's got this guy by the shirt collar and he's like, "Who did this? Who killed my friend? Do you have any information that could lead to the killer's whereabouts?" Inside the wallet is a fake FBI badge, a matchbook from a nearby bar, and a small plastic bag of blue dust. Tim can deduce that Nick must have stumbled into something big, and it likely got him killed. So he follows up these clues by checking out the Last Chance Bar, a place he describes as being seedy and in a bad part of town, despite the bouncer being an infant.
Go drink. I'm busy.
Busy doing what? Huh? Listening to your family values tour, CD, you prick. So annoying. Also, the bartender's a cyborg.
Hey there, what can I get you?
People show up to this bar to watch a pirate broadcast, a call-in talk show hosted by a man named Joe TV. This public access conspiracy theorist is a bit of a local folk hero that I can only imagine was inspired by the early days of Alex Jones and other then benign oddballs that wanted a podium to spread fringe beliefs. And this guy's so fringe, he's got fringe on his jacket.
Yes, Alex, how you doing?
Pretty good.
I was just kind of curious if it's true that the police can have laser or infrared...
Weird to think that his ilk were at one time just lovable cranks that kept New Aris weird.
Hello?
Yeah, this is Kurt Cobain, and I have a message from God.
God, I knew you were there, Kurt. I knew you were there all along.
It is alien.
I knew you were there.
All right. I see the appeal. Only this guy makes a legitimate effort to investigate and confirm the wild stories about cryptids and cover-ups that his audience suggests. A caller claims to have seen a Bigfoot around town, and Joe makes a solemn pledge to figure it out. A guy playing darts strong-arms Tim into a match, which he loses. The dart player, incensed by this, instigates a fight wherein Tim easily neutralizes his foe. He's not even trying, he just kinda hip-checks him and the guy deactivates. This scene ends with the most out-of-pocket dialogue, as Tim's victory over the dart player attracts the attention of a woman named Jessica.
That was such graceful aim. You really know how to shoot your love. Why don't we go back to my place for some target practice?
Part of me was waiting for the game to smash cut to Tim just getting the shit beat out of him while this happy fantasy plays in his brain-damaged mind.
My neck! Oh, my back! At least two other things.
But no, this actually just happens, and from a gameplay perspective, it's kind of insidious, because you're given the option to go home with her or turn her down, and like, she seems nice. What do I got going on where I wouldn't say, but going home with her leads to your death. If there is one thing sorely missing from this game, it's Harvester-level death cutscenes, where we see our plucky hero get destroyed in absurdist scenarios. So you have to turn her down, which ends with you winding up at her place anyway, because you get mugged as soon as you leave, and she drags Tim back to her place to recover. While Tim is out, he has another vision from Black and White World and sees Dr. Marlin beating more patients at whatever facility we keep seeing, asking which one of you freaks kills me. This whole bit with the bar leading to Jessica's apartment to me also showcases the kind of adorable naivety of its creators. They wanted to cover mature and challenging subjects, but were either intentionally or unintentionally depicting them all using cartoon logic. I wouldn't expect a game that makes the exploitation of the homeless a central theme to also make all its homeless characters comedic. They're all just like lovable drunks that don't seem to have much else contributing to their circumstances.
I'm grocery shopping for dinner.
Now you're talking.
Jessica timidly reveals that she is a sex worker, and for a second, I hope that the boys can stay on course here. I'm sweating for them, and praying that they treat this subject with some measure of tact. And weirdly, they kinda do for a little bit. They make some attempt at humanizing this character. They give her a sweet little monologue about how perseverance is important to her. And then Coyote running in midair, they eventually look down to insanely comedic effect.
Jessica, what did I tell you about not checking in with me? And who the fuck is this? You don't have an appointment. What do you think, we're running a fucking charity?
Just walks into the room like a cartoon man, actively counting a fanned-out collection of bills.
Hey, why don't you shut up before I gut your insides? Where the hell is my machete?
Keep looking, you'll find it. Tim escapes out a window and heads over to the police station to report his mugging. On the way, he wonders why he keeps seeing autistic people in his visions, and then in an act of internal self-scolding admits that he doesn't know why he assumed they would be autistic, and that was kind of weird of him.
Wait. How could I even know that guy's autistic? I didn't see anything that would suggest he was.
Like what, Tim? What kind of things should you be on the lookout for? What kind of things might give you that impression? Just curious, would like to know. I don't know, at a certain point you gotta relent that it's the 90s. It's only in jest that I tone police a brick wall. He heads to Barbarelli, the partner of the cop he busted for taking drug money. But he isn't in his office. He does find a fax that he received about a murdered beat cop that sounds remarkably similar to the circumstances of Nick's death. And it sounds like this has been a pattern that the police have been trying to keep a lid on, implying a possible serial killer. At the crime scene, Tim uses the FBI badge he found on Nick's body to get past the cop guarding the perimeter, and he uses the name Sykes, which was too unique to not be some kind of pop culture reference, and knowing their influences, I'm gonna guess it's a Wing Commander reference because they seem like the types. Nerd types.
Chief Tech Robert Sykes. You can call me Flyers.
The new victim's body is already gone by now, but Tim chats up someone from forensics about the recent slayings and about the blue dust he found and subsequently lost. The cops don't know what it is, assuming it to be a new narcotic as they keep finding traces of it on dead bodies. What's weird is that many of these bodies have been found in advanced stages of decay. This seems to be a separate phenomenon from the people being found normal dead.
Officer Rizzo was on duty when she was murdered. She would patrol the area and clean up the local trash, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, she'd pick up trash off the floor like a little garbage woman, right? Tim heads to the morgue and talks with the mortician there about the recent murders and drug-related deaths. I'm sorry, I've just, in watching this back, realized that you find the blue drug at Heisenberg Park. Very interesting, unrelated, uninteresting coincidence. He walks Tim over to where the dead police officer is being kept and shows him her mangled jigsaw of a body, comparing the wounds to that of a tiger attack. The sight of this is too much for Tim, and he flees from the room to throw up. Hearing a commotion on the other side of the door, he steps back in to find the mortician dead, and the police officer's remains missing from their slab. Knowing that this killer is capable of leaping 20 feet and bending steel bars has me thinking it's something that ain't exactly human, and cleverly lends some validation to the Joe TV caller that claimed to have spotted a Bigfoot in the city. I'm starting to think this might be a Bigfoot, or maybe several big feet. After this encounter, Tim doesn't feel like implicating himself in this chaos any further and decides to just go home and get a fresh start. The next morning, he gets a call on his vid phone from Jessica. She went through his wallet while he was passed out and found his phone number. Cute! She wants to get dinner tonight at Skyline. So instead of working on that restaurant review, Tim heads over to the police station to speak to the head of forensics over there, and hand him a weird, semi-translucent bit of organic material he found at the last crime scene for analysis. Something he was only allowed to do by threatening to reveal Barbarelli's affair to his wife. I wonder if there was some kind of subtext here, in that Tim helped Nick by uncovering his wife's affair, and now he's using the same scenario as a bargaining chip. I hope it isn't though, because the use of subtext is cowardly. Eventually, Tim gets a page from Jessica about their date, and he heads over to the restaurant. On the subway over, Tim thinks about the strange visions he's been having, how they feel somehow familiar. He considers asking Jessica about them, thinking she'd have some valuable insight, given she's also kind of It sounds like he has quickly developed some pretty strong feelings for her, and is willing to look past the fact that being around her means being threatened by a guy with a machete sometimes. Their date goes kind of well at first. Tim is kind of killing it.
Well, it's just that your eyes, they're so sensuous. I can see these soft reflections gazing out at me.
I mean, within the context of the story, this is working on her, according to the script. In the middle of Tim professing his feelings for Jessica, Hall Mags keeps beeping him trying to get updates on the Skyline review.
What do you mean I'm fired? That's ridiculous.
Why are you surprised? I mean, you've been chewed out for not working twice so far. I realize you have some kind of journalistic integrity thing and a relatable blasé attitude about your job, but like, you weren't doing it. You're at the restaurant you were supposed to review and you didn't even bring a notepad. See, you could have been writing about this.
Boss, you're gonna love this. So I'm about to order, right? When two guys with guns.
Tim is unable to use the elevator, and a grainy CCTV monitor makes it clear that there was some kind of massacre that leaves the fate of Jessica unknown. A tied-up security guard perfectly expresses how I would react to the sight of a room full of dead billionaires.
Oh my God! No way!
That night, Tim sees another vision. In this one, Dr. Marlin writes in his journal that he believes the autistic to be more prone to developing psychic abilities, a rabbit hole he's wandered deep down. His studying of psychic abilities has led him to have what he believes to be a premonition of his own death at the hands of his subjects. This has caused him to fear and resent them. At the police station, the lead forensics guy, Jim, has the results from that sample you gave him, and it's inconclusive whether or not it's human or animal. Some properties are clearly human, but it's also difficult to photograph and test on account of it having the properties of a chameleon, as well as similar compounds produced by cats. Though he hasn't heard from Jessica, we find a police report about the shooting and learn that, aside from injuries, there was only one death, a man named Felden Malthus. Jim says it's clear that this was an organized assassination. This guy was sitting right next to Victor Ambrose, who had recently given large sums of money to Felden's pharmaceutical company, Primax. There's a throwaway line in here that I actually perked up upon hearing because it's a tiny bit of world building that is pretty pointedly retro-futuristic. Apparently the weapons the assassins used were gyro rocket guns.
As quick as 2 gyro rockets slicing through his body. One of the few weapons that can penetrate a bulletproof vest and kill the human target in one shot.
Which was a short-lived firearm oddity in the 1960s.
One of these.
A gun that, instead of bullets, fired tiny little fuel-propelled rockets that proved to be powerful but not very accurate. So while you could shoot through walls essentially, you could also sometimes just wanted curve into my grandfather. Though in this world, this technology is new and prohibitively expensive.
It's so expensive, very few ever use it.
Meaning, if someone used it, it was with clear intention and purpose. A future first envisioned by Chris Rock.
Every time somebody gets shot, you be like, damn, he must have did something. Should they put $50,000 worth of bullets in his head?
The last bit of information we can wring from Jim is that Primax was, not long ago, on the brink of bankruptcy and has suspiciously become the largest supplier of chemicals and lab equipment in New Aris out of nowhere. Since the street meat Tim found was a dead end, he decides to check out Primax in hopes of picking up the trail of Nick's murderer. Posing as an electrician, Tim walks into the building and right up to Malthus's office. In a safe behind a holographic fish tank, we find a letter from the Ambrose Foundation about a grant so large it completely resurfaced the drowning company. Alongside this is an invoice from Malthus billed to Noxitech for the same amount of money for all sorts of laboratory apparatus. While Tim looks back and forth at these two papers and one giant gear in his noggin makes a hearty thunk, Joe of Joe TV fame appears behind him. Turns out he's been tailing Tim for a while, observing his wild adventures that have crisscrossed with his own investigations into the spooky doings about town. Joe finally confirms what the blue dust is. It's a new, highly addictive synthetic street drug called Ice Rock that has quickly dominated the market. A large quantity of it was seemingly distributed for free before the well dried up, and now people are fiending for a fix of a substance that is all sold out. This has caused a great deal of chaos in the inner city. The decomposed bodies that the police have been finding are the results of overdosing on Ice Rock. First comes violent outbursts, then your insides just time-lapse decay. New Aris's dealers and gangs are bracing for another shipment of the stuff from its mysterious supplier. When asked about this Noxitech, Joe explains that he was sent there following that call from his viewer about a Bigfoot sighting. He didn't see a Bigfoot, but he did see heavily armed guards transporting crates with Primax stamped on them. On the way out, Tim finally receives word from Jessica. Frankie, her pimp, has apparently lost it and she fears for her life. He quickly shows up at her place and she frantically explains that Frankie burst into her apartment and attacked her and then started slamming his head against the wall. She is so hysterical that she has to turn the page on her script to find her place again.
He threw me to the floor and started beating his head up against the wall. He wouldn't stop.
She confirms that the addiction that changed Frankie was ice rock. Upstairs, we find Frankie's melted corpse in her bed.
It's okay. It's okay. He's just melted. Okay? He's just a soup of liquid flesh in your nice satin sheets, okay? You understand? He's like a little stew now. You understand? A little human stew. Is this comforting you?
She's distraught, but Tim tells her to report everything they've learned to Captain Barbarelli, and she reluctantly agrees. On the subway over to Noxitec, Tim reckons with the severity of what he'd be accusing Victor Ambrose of. It's going to be a tough sell, convincing everyone that this charismatic tech bro has been bankrolling a drug that induces full body melt. He caps off this series of thoughts by expressing remorse for having to blackmail Barbarelli to get what he wanted out of him, forgetting the adage that John Shenmue taught us.
Don't you know that blackmail is way uncool?
At Noxitec, the place is empty, save for a scientist named Dr. Steinman. He's dying due to exposure to a harmful chemical and thus doesn't give a fuck about Noxitec and speaks candidly about Victor Ambrose, claiming that every action he's taken as a humanitarian has had a secondary motive. This guy was in charge of something called Project Emery's, an attempt to alter brainwave patterns using chemical induction. His hope was that the research from this project would be used to help disabled people, using language not dissimilar to Dr. Marlin in Black and White World.
It is ironic that those who are deemed unfit for society might be the ones to save it.
Victor would give complete control of this project to this guy, but when it started to show promising results, he began making bizarre requests, like the drug should make the subjects stronger physically and respond unwaveringly to commands. Things took a darker turn when Victor proclaimed that lab rats would not provide the necessary data to advance production.
One day at the lab, we injected a bum with the chemical. He immediately went into convulsions.
Sometimes a good line is just a good line. No need to dress it up in $10 scientific terms. He goes on to explain that pretty much every other organization that Ambrose funded was a front that socketed into this project. He used Primax to make ice rock, then used Noxitec as the dummy company where it would be distributed. Once the police caught on to the homeless population dwindling, and in this world, I guess, cared about that rather than actively participating in their mistreatment, the hospital was created to farm new test subjects. What wound up on the street was a failed version of the drug that was meant to stimulate muscle and neurological growth. The reason for this was testing. They just wanted to see what it would do on a large number of human subjects, and ultimately what it did was make them go crazy and then melt. This also explains the string of similar murders. There was no serial killer, just the offspring of Ambrose's experiments, one of which tossed this guy into a vat of ice rock chemicals that will eventually end him in similar fashion. He will produce too much adrenaline and hydrochloric acid for his body to handle, and desperately look for something to maintain his Cheb Chelios-like high before dissolving. Felden became paranoid that this house of cards would tumble on top of him, so he tried to back out of this deal and threatened to out Victor to the authorities, which led to Victor having him killed under the attempted guise of a spray and pray robbery. One thing that stands out in this lengthy exchange is an anecdote about one of the test subjects attempting to escape until Victor stopped him simply by staring him down, referring to their behavior as that of a domesticated pet.
I was feeding my pets.
Pretty creepy revelation, huh?
What? That Ambrose's pet was a part human chimera of sorts?
Yeah.
I can see how it would perturb one, keeping a malignant aberration, a possible threat to one's power as a household pet.
Yeah, I guess that's kind of the gist of it.
I suppose the same could be said of me. Remember the name for your games, Circuit City!
Over at the hospital, we find a journal. The contents recount this man's descent into addiction as he skimmed some ice rock off the production line and quickly began to lose touch with reality. believing he saw Noxitec's human experiments transform and mutate into monsters, something that's partially verified as not a hallucination as we get a peek at some kind of freak science experiment while Tim sneaks his way further into the facility. This slight variation of exposition dump was mildly intriguing after something of a slog of exposition. I didn't really have a firm grasp on what I felt does not work about this plot until I had to recount it. And the truth is that it does a lot of telling instead of showing. All the horror and vice inflicted on this city as a result of a handful of rich assholes is barely glimpsed behind the boring wall of paperwork that set it in motion. Somewhere in this city, a freak on a leash is killing anyone that gets close to a lab of freaks, and there's a bunch of dudes making blue drugs and getting high off it while they're making it, and then themselves turning into freaks. And we're here rifling through ledgers and binders. So much time is devoted to explaining how the pieces fit, but I know the pieces fit because I watched them fall away. Eventually we find Joe TV strapped to a table and kept in place by a grid of lasers, which requires one of a handful of laughably convoluted steps in order to bypass. Of all the ways to disable this high-tech table, would you have guessed using a knife to remove the cover of a security box, then using matches to melt the plastic on the wires, and then cutting the wires with wire cutters, and then removing this plant from its pot, setting the pot beneath a leak in the ceiling until it was full, and then dumping that water on a control panel? Why don't you just get a rock? Nothing beats that. I think they were starting to cut a few production corners in these late areas, or this was a rewrite they couldn't get around to filming because after you free Joe TV, there isn't a cutscene or even a conversation going over how he managed to catch up to Tim sleuthing, how he got himself caught, and what he learned. Thankfully, it's a chapter change, so they just include 2 fat paragraphs that explain that Joe TV was able to learn that Ambrose has devised a way of distributing the new and improved ice rock to the entire population of New Aris, which involves the Skyline restaurant somehow. Apparently there was an action sequence, we'll have to imagine, in which Joe tells Tim he's got a ride waiting for him outside. He's gonna cause a distraction. I can only presume that Tim gave a half-hearted attempt of talking him out of it before Joe gave a tip of his hat and said something quippy like, "Don't worry, Tim. The voice of this city is bulletproof," before running into a hail of gunfire, just utterly mowed down by machine guns. Think RoboCop boardroom scene, but like triple it. Then there's just nothing left of this dude save for a blood-spattered Stetson. Again, this scene was not provided to me, so I'm filling in the blanks. Over at the Skyline,
you pick up the rock.
Now we're talking. Yes, Tim! The first smart thing you've done in this entire game. In the security room, Tim watches Victor attempt to recruit the city's pimps and pushers to fall in line with distributing Ice Rock 2, all of which are observant enough to notice the fact that the dizzying high of Ice Rock 1 was kind of overshadowed by, you know, the reality that it turned you into a 28 days later rage zombie, and to a lesser extent a 28 months later rage zombie. Disappointed by this result, Ambrose simply has them all killed. His motives in the end are kind of confusing to me. I mean, they don't explain the specifics, but he clearly already has some kind of chemical emitters set up on the roof, turning the towering restaurant into a massive spinning meth sprinkler. So why bother getting these guys in on the deal? Was the plan that the emitters would simply get everyone hooked, and then they'd need more of the drug which they would get from dealers on Noxitec's payroll? So now what? Are you gonna stand on the corner yourself? Or pace back and forth at the festival with a bag of neon blue powder casually wiggling just outside of your pocket? I'm on your side. Let's figure this shit out. Tim follows the tubes from these devices down some kind of service elevator and finally faces off against Victor. There's too many details in this last showdown where I'm like, somehow this happens. I guess that's a bad sign, but fuck it. In a rather short and sweet villainous monologue, he explains that he's observed New Aris sliding into the gutter and believes the only way to save it from its own rotten core is to reprogram its population. So, instead of using his immeasurable wealth and influence to push for, like, a school lunch program, he's perfected a narcotic that will sort of unlock the potential of everyone's brain limitless style, and thus rid the city of crime and suffering for some reason, I guess. He of course includes the caveat that he would oversee and govern this proposed utopia, because, well, it was his idea. The moment the black and white timeline and this one crossover, I feel like I maybe don't entirely understand. I feel like something really significant happens here. I get that. I can read the room. There is tension. There is revelation happening. I just, at the moment, can't confidently say I know what it means. After Victor's speech, Tim says,
"I've done this before. This time I'm not helpless. Tobias."
and seems to realize that previously, or in some other timeline or lifetime, he was Johnny, the autistic psychic that was killed by Dr. Marlin, and that Victor was Tobias Marlin. And they both totally get what's happening here. They have a fight scene comparable to like a Hammer horror Dracula film, you know, where they both just take turns throttling each other, and eventually Tim pushes him into the ring of boiling chemicals or whatever this is. It's a hazard. Wait a minute.
The maglev chamber and the restaurant.
Oh, so he did write what that was. I mean, yeah, I guess that sounds shitty. A bright light knocks Tim back, and he wakes up back on the roof of the skyline. Only Jessica is there. She saved him from danger once again. She came with Barbarelli after Joe TV radioed that Tim was about to crack the serial killer case and needed help. The two embrace and look out at the city they've saved, the nightmare finally over, and everything worked out suspiciously well. This saccharine storybook ending is undercut when we're given a slow pan across a newspaper article detailing the aftermath of Tim's adventure. The official story is that the Skyline's maglev chamber malfunctioned and caused an explosion. The police found 10 dead bodies that were riddled with bullets and 2 charred bodies that they've been unable to identify. They also report finding 2 suspects that have been taken into custody. While the city is saved from this one specific threat, unfortunately, it doesn't seem like the New Ars police force have been able to make heads or tails of what was going on here, and this story has hardly led to the massive expose we had hoped for, and we're given conflicting information about the fate of our heroes. Adding on to this head-scratcher of an ending, we get a little title card in Latin that loosely translates to, "I will rise again. Times change and we change with them." While the newspaper scrawl remains the same, the penultimate rooftop scene can be quite different if Jessica doesn't make it to the end. Before the date at Skyline, there is a flag for something to happen that is, if I remember correctly, only prompted if you decided to examine the subway tokens in your inventory. Tim will say he's running low and needs to buy some more, which triggers a little cutscene of him buying more. But if you never do that, he'll only realize he needed more at the last minute and will once again take it upon himself to buy more, only this time he finds a man who's clearly overdosing on ice rock and gets knocked out, making him late for his date with Jessica. He shows up well after the assassination of Felden Malthus, and unfortunately this time around, Jessica did not survive. This triggers a new flashback where an orderly wheels Johnny into the electroshock room on Dr. Marlin's orders, and the nurse from earlier orders him to take the boy back to his room, expressing that she thinks the doctor has lost it. The rest of the game plays out much the same, but following the explosion on the Skyline roof, Joe TV drags Tim to safety. Even though they've both cracked the case on the biggest story in the city, Tim doesn't share Joe's excitement, ending on a comically poignant sentiment.
What's the good of glory when you have no one to share it with?
Yeah, you hear that, Joe? You're nobody. Tim may as well be talking to a ghost. Wait, wouldn't he be? The last time we saw Joe, he was running into a Primax death squad.
What happened to the guards?
Believe me, you're better off not.
Hey, you know what? Say no more, buddy. You're alright by me. I was reminded of the possibility of further content when I noticed the credits list a hooded stranger played by one Raymond Luxury Yacht that I could not recall ever coming across. The story as I've presented it is, I guess you could say, the most ideal and complete experience, but it's one you're not likely to experience exactly like I did. There are steps to get to Synnergist's hidden content, and some of them you can accidentally wander into, and others I haven't the faintest idea how you were meant to even somewhat get there with years of contemplation and study. If we rewind back to the moment Tim escapes certain death at the hands of Jessica's pimp, you can head back to Tim's apartment. On his bookshelf is a framed photo of a penny farthing. You have to click on this photo exactly 6 times, no more, no less. This was apparently one of 2 Babylon 5 references that went over my head because my mental illnesses are different. So if you correctly counted to 6, which is only 2 more than most Ogren can count in the Warhammer 40k universe, you see what I mean. Head over to Heisenberg Park, which you have no reason to return to, and a man in a strange outfit will appear. Talking to him, it's clear he knows who Tim is, and remarks that it's good to see him again. When it's obvious that Tim does not know him, he looks at his watch and says close enough, giving him a classic adventure game problem solver, a grappling hook. The next step requires playing a pinball machine until a certain prompt about stopping the clock appears. I'm guessing this was less of a pop culture reference and more self-referential to their publisher's wheelhouse. This makes a broken watch appear in the alley next to Jessica's apartment. I think this presumes you're going down the route where Jessica dies, so you have to once again not refill your subway tokens. If you attempt to leave the screen with Jessica's body, you once again cross paths with the hooded man. Only this time he doesn't know who Tim is, and he seems distraught that he can't keep track of time. You can offer to give him the broken watch you found, which appears to complete some kind of causality loop, because if you don't give it to him, the grappling hook he gave you when he knew you will disappear. The weird thing is, I'm not sure if the concept of time travel is restricted to this hidden content or if the main story and the intersection of flashback timeline and present day timeline are the result of or informed by time travel in any way. I went through the entirety of my playthrough waiting for some clear indication of time travel because let's be honest, Tim Machin is not a real human being's name, and is likely just an Ermagerd-ification of Time Machine. I was fully expecting a sequence, kind of like Van Helsing working out who Mr. Alucard was, where someone sees Tim Machin written on a piece of paper and goes, wait a minute, oh my god. But if I had to guess, there probably isn't anything that deep going on, and it's more likely that the game was simply meant to ruminate, as Ambrose rambled on about in his introductory scene, on cycles. Cycles of violence, of death, of rebirth, and the particulars of the connection between both plot lines isn't all that important beyond the fact that they mirror each other. There are a handful of other steps, some of them make sense, most don't, and the idea of attempting to make sense of them requires brain activity that is completely foreign to me. But the end game of these steps leads you to the morgue, where inside a cold storage drawer we find Kartik Bala himself. This acts as a sort of Q&A session with the game's creator. Tim can ask questions that are pretty much just fan questions that answer the same shit I was struggling with just a moment ago, such as, what do the black and white scenes have to do with the game? And with no flowery language or concern for artistic interpretation, he plainly states what this game means. So I guess I could issue another spoiler warning that is one level deeper, a subtext spoiler warning if you will, and you can skip to this time if you'd like to not have your interpretation of the game's plot tainted with the truth. Tim and Victor are reincarnations of Johnny and Tobias. Tobias killed Johnny, fearing that he would one day kill him, not knowing that this would happen anyway in another lifetime. And if you had any lingering uncertainty about the ending, he confirms that the flash of light before the last cutscene was meant to mirror the flash of light that killed Johnny. So Tim, and for that matter Joe TV, are both dead at the end of the game, and anything shown after is a dream. And look, I'm not a screenwriter. I don't have an eye for mise-en-scene. In fact, most of the media I consume deals with puppets coming to life and murdering people under the instruction of some kind of master. But I think I get what they're doing now, and it's not mentioned anywhere in the game, but if I could proffer some of my own analysis, I guess it would make sense that Jessica plays a role in this whole reincarnated repeat of history deal. Just as Jessica seems to always come to the rescue for Tim, Nurse Givens stepped in the way of Dr. Tobias's cruel methods more than once.
Most would be bitter in her situation, but she's so giving.
Which could absolutely be one of many amateurish lines of dialogue, but I'm gonna give them the benefit of the doubt because they made a video game and I didn't. There's also some questions you can ask about the game's development and the thought process behind things like the cover art and the title Synnergist. Synnergist was meant to imply the result of many aspects coming together, but the reason it was given an extra N was that you'd instinctively emphasize the syllable sin. He says this is meant to represent Tim's sins, which to me sounds like a roundabout way of getting to, we thought it sounded cool. Also, I misspell words a lot. I mean, does Tim really have sins? Like, what does he do in this game that would be considered sinful aside from breaking into a few places and being racist to a robot? We're canceling him for that? Look, I think we all know they're scary and they talk kind of funny. It's a bit patronizing, but not untrue, that Synnergist gets a couple extra stars in my non-existent rating system due to the heart and time and youthful tenacity required for it to make it to shelves. That said, ignoring that, it is uncharacteristically complex and ambitiously heady when placed next to the games that inspired it. It's clever and different, with numerous asterisks next to those words. It also doesn't have to be read that way. On a surface level, you can accept it as an amusing little who's doing it caper following a would-be investigative reporter. A point-and-click adventure embodying an overthought home movie that tackles delicate ideas they probably weren't all that prepared to handle with tact. It's so admirable that, given the chance to make an adventure game, they didn't want to play it safe, with just a badass, grizzled detective guy in a noir-tinted metropolis investigating a murder that implicates a shady corporation. They made the bold decision of having this guy investigate a murder that implicates a shady corporation. It's less concerned with its characters and plot beats and more concerned with its world and a selection of strong themes. Along the way, there are a handful of small interactions and characters that seem like set dressing, but they maintain the feeling that the city is becoming more and more depraved and desperate, and that there is an abundance of wealthy people simply observing its decline and doing next to nothing to help. It never really becomes a proper plot point, but several references are made to this quickly spreading environmental disaster that all but destroyed a nearby river, and as a last resort they just kind of dropped a dome over it that you can see in shots of the New Artist skyline. There is actually a surprising amount of considerate and competent writing underneath all the after-school special depictions of the city's seedier elements. They even drive home the point that this solution in itself was temporary at best. At one point you enter an underground lab near the dome, and polluted river water seeps through the earth and drips down the walls. It's got things to say, despite its creators being babies that don't know how to say a lot. The creation of Synnergist followed an extended period of edging, nearer and nearer to a possible release, such that the time it finally did come out, it was kind of painful and weird. In a genre fraught with oddballs, this game is doubly so due to it being made by some punk kids, as the popularity of its tech was diminishing and gamers were incorrectly, stupidly even, becoming fatigued by point-and-click adventure games with FMV elements. So it lands in a unique place where it isn't as visually impressive as some other games, years before its release, even ones using a fork of the same engine, such as Noctropolis, but it also learned by example to avoid certain pitfalls of other games, granting it this oddly appropriate stuck-out-of-time feeling. It was a game made with floppy disks in mind, then put onto a CD. Now, I say it avoids some pitfalls, but rest assured there's plenty of other kinds of chasms and crevasses. Control-wise, this is pretty ideal for me. Sticking closely to the definition of point and click, you simply point and click! There's no fussing about with choosing different cursors or verbs. It's simply split into look and interact. Looking at objects prompts a Sierra-esque narrator to describe what you've clicked on.
The victim's last gasp of life has been outlined by chalk.
This voice is kind of ubiquitous, even announcing when you've left one screen to go to another. This is a cute addition and nod to the adventure games of old, but it's also a bit excessive. I don't need every goddamn thing described to me like spoken closed captions. I can make sense of what's going on most of the time.
You pick up the rock off the ground. There is now a rock in your inventory. If at any point you'd like to use that rock for anything, say, solving an item-based puzzle, you can access it by opening up your inventory, mousing over the icon that looks a bit like a rock, and clicking on the rock. Also, if you need help finding your own ass, you can check the manual.
The UI is also exactly what I want out of a game from this era, appearing when you mouse over the top of the frame and also allowing for some descriptive narration. Using items is very simple, and anytime you'd need to combine an item with another to accomplish something, Tim will just pick up on what you're going for and combine them himself. There's a lot to enjoy here as an adventure game fan, and a lot of very familiar frustrations as well. Some wild guesswork, weird sequential issues, and pixel hunting. Often these issues arise because of some wildly overthought out solution that is ultimately kind of sweet, and I just can't stay mad at it. For example, there's a part where you have to get into the city morgue but you can't get to the elevator because there's a janitor that tells you to fuck off. But at the start of this area, there's a garbage can you can look at. And of course, my eyes went straight to it. I'm attuned to that sort of thing, you know. I know it. I live in it. You can attempt to make Tim root around in the trash, but he refuses. So in my head, I'm like, okay, the game says no. I will respect that. You're valid, king. Go off. On the janitor's cart, he just has his diary laying out, and you can thumb through it standing right in front of him. Just, all right, what do we got here? Yada yada. Had that dream again. Bitter about my relationship with my father. Okay, hello. Now you have my attention. Now I will continue reading this diary in front of the man who wrote it. In here, he describes how he's been in a terrible mood since he lost a photo of his girlfriend Sandy, thinking someone threw it out just to get back at him for spacing out thinking about her while he should be sweeping. So what the game wants you to do now is go back outside to the dumpster and fish out the photo of Sandy, but it already told me that Tim didn't want to do that. See, I didn't struggle with this too long, however, because I knew when I saw that dumpster, I just knew there was something special about it. I knew I was going to come back later anyways. But you see what I mean. This is nothing compared to some of the weird logic employed in a few of the late game item puzzles. It doesn't help that they often concern technology that I do not understand, thus I do not understand what applications my items will provide. I know rock. I know what rock do. I think all items in an adventure game could just be rocks of different shapes and densities. In truth, I'm just being a little shit. As far as adventure game moon logic goes, there are far worse offenders than Synnergist. I'm actually straining to be an asshole about it. I'm not used to that. Usually I spend all my energy trying to tamper the other wolf in me. The one that's just a nasty bitch. Any indefensible problems it has are technical ones, likely exacerbated by running the game on modern hardware. But I'm sure the game's straightforward nature and user-friendliness can be attributed to the fact that it's a game made by gamers of this exact type of game. While there are fail states, they are rare and decently telegraphed. It's just a shame that they are relegated to text descriptions and not given visual accompaniment for me to grin dubiously at and say, oh, one moment, I'm getting a Collington.
Hey, what are you doing?
I lost my place. I don't remember what the punchline of that was. But like, come on, guys. We were so deep in the 90s. Like, it does not matter. Go for broke. Be problematic. If you were ever going to do it. Simply because I can't think of a more comparable contemporary, Noctropolis shares a lot of DNA and programming with Synnergist. But if you compare the two, it is a bit more clear which was made by a large studio and which was made by a group of kids. But honestly, it's not a huge difference. It's noticeable that Synnergist doesn't swing for the fences with wacky changes in perspective or detailed backgrounds with complex moving bits. It doesn't even attempt to do much with the FMV elements, playing it safe by having a little window pop up with a right down the barrel shot of the subject. Where this triumphs over Noctropolis is that the FMV cutscenes are pretty universally amusing. There is always something uncanny or silly about them that is just riveting. Can't look away. There's an unregulated quality to it. It's unpredictable. I don't know what any of these goobers are gonna do.
Better watch your back, pal. Around here, death always rubs off on people who get involved.
He wants to do what?
Why don't I come back to your place? Bend you over into positions that you never knew that you could reach.
You're always kind of aware of the production. That little look off camera as if to say, how's that? Is that good? Yes, it was good. One of my favorite performances in the game is Jessica, because she's a complicated character that they couldn't really write. She comes out like a person that does not exist and never has. So it doesn't matter who plays her. That said, she's still somehow miscast, and it works perfectly in this paradoxical, unintentional, post-ironic way. It creates this tone that is all over the place, borderline John Waters-esque, where one moment her pimp is bursting through the door wielding a machete and spouting, I think, the only profanity in the game, or at least the most highest concentration of it, when not moments ago this was happening.
Well, I've always been fond of the simple things. You know, little things, like a flower growing from the sidewalk crack, or a spider weaving a web which glows from the neon sign it hangs from.
She's just like the only normal, nice person in the game. I'm sure more could be said and poked fun at about the quality of performance, but I fully admit my bias here. I think this is just good. But that comes from a person that openly enjoys bad things. I got no barometer for quality. I just know this makes me feel something, anything, everything. Obviously, nobody here is a professional, and it's clear that half of them probably didn't understand the medium in which they were meant to perform in, and the other half was just the guys making the game. Joe TV, whose actual name is Joseph, was one of the main designers that had a hand in just about every aspect of development. The cyborg bartender is Evan, the lead writer. Hillary was played by Sandra, the lead artist. One of Tim's coworkers is Aaron, the lead programmer. The guy playing darts is Tom, one of the audio engineers. Hell, even Jeff, the video actor for Tim, had to perform as Tim and then help animate his scenes. I usually take a minute or two to snoop around into what FMV actors got up to after a project like this, if they continued to find work or if it was just a one and done deal, probably done as a favor, and much of the cast here falls into the latter camp. So, at a certain point in Googling these gaming deserters, I came to the morbid realization that I was just creeping on normal civilians that should probably just be left alone. The excitement of finding where they wound up was undercut by the sudden terror of reckoning with just how easy it was. Well, anyway, one of many ways the dev team just kind of lucked out was with the game's cover art, which is gorgeous, and unsurprisingly so, as it's the work of Dave McKean, a mixed media illustrator that has long dwelled in media that has meant a lot to me, such as Neil Gaiman's Sandman, as well as numerous album covers for goth and industrial acts like Skinny Puppy, Frontline Assembly, Delirium, and Fear Factory. They simply rang up McKean and asked if he'd do what I believe is still the only video game cover art of his long career, and he agreed after hearing an elevator pitch for some themes in the game. And you can certainly see them rendered in the final product, such as the blue dust and a distorted timeline splitting our lead in two. It's really something. Let's take a closer look at a physical copy. Okay, here we have a pristine copy of Synnergist in this video someone uploaded because it would have cost $100 fucking to ship one. The DOS era provided a number of memorable and downright beautiful scores. It was a time full of games with soundtracks that went off for no reason. The sound cards of the era had a particular timbre, a certain bwomp, if you will. It's hard not being swept up in that wave of nostalgia. However, the soundtrack for Synnergist is a little understated and crusty, occasionally to great effect. Often there will be areas with what sound just like a soft, crusty bass line. It winds up being kind of effectively eerie, but there are certainly some areas with a short looping melody that can become a little grating, especially if you're stuck wandering back and forth because you forgot what you're supposed to be looking for and you wish that there was some environmental clue such as a sloppy application of yellow paint that is so out of place that it draws your eyes to it. I need that because I'm the average gamer. Salt of the earth. A moron. There are some strange anomalies in this Synnergist soundtrack though. Some of these are intentional, I think. Every now and then the game would experience an audio and visual glitch so jarring it acted as a jump scare when moving from one scene to another. It was so unusual that I began to wonder if it was allowed on purpose to play into the game's cerebral concept or simply act as a Citizen Kane cockatoo. Then I remembered these are TV nerds and probably not filmhead nerds. My favorite moment from the soundtrack came from this genuinely unsettling track it uses twice, I think to denote something off-kilter happening, and it's another situation that just jostled me from the brain-off near comatose daze I enter into while gaming. The soundtrack was doing its usual simmering bass line and then whoa! I mean, what the heck was that? That'll send shivers down your spine. Speaking of which, any evidence gathered on those ghosts?
I have compiled several possible EVP recordings.
Well, that's great.
Playing EVP recording.
I had a question about your menu. So you no longer have a listing for your pretzel crust pizza, but like, let's watch.
Oh, right, yeah, that's when I was ordering that pizza.
Pizza with a little bit of pretzel on it. Battery low.
Synnergist is goofy and amateurish, but so are a lot of games from this era and this genre, and it's a thing, should you dwell here long enough, you begin to see as worth celebrating. A lot of the games that led to Synnergist were from this specific pocket of time that fostered a sort of silent indie community, where maybe your game's getting funded, but the tools to make the game were neither widely available nor well established. In the early to mid-90s, if you woke up one day with the dream of making your own game, there was no database of resources. It was all about who you know and who you blow. Away with your sales pitch. You just had to figure it out. Everyone was just figuring it out from scratch. To me, that makes the fact that Synnergist got as far as it did, as obscure and jank as it is, doubly impressive. Creatively inspiring even. Yes, it was hamstrung on release, came out years after it should have, and never quite joined the pantheon of beloved adventure games. But it's got a fun story with an intriguing mystery that is so steeped in 90s grime you can't hope to scrape it off. It's embedded in there, firm, chock full of youthful indie quirkiness. It's like the Clerks of point-and-click adventure games. It's like the Slacker of point-and-click adventure games. It's like the... well, you get it. It's like the Stranger Than Paradise of point-and-click. It's a little more accessible for those not acquainted with older adventure games, and it's visually enjoyable both ironically and unironically. Your mileage may vary. It's one of those games that I don't see anyone claiming ownership of and repackaging anytime soon, but it's got real blood, sweat, and tears in it. I think it actually produces that. Might explain the fucked up audio glitches and multiple Tim bugs. It's out there. It's loose. One of God's own prototypes. Obviously, Vicarious Visions and the minds behind Synnergist went on to greater successes, and this game likely exists as a faint footnote in that catalog. But I bet this was the hardest they tried, the most concentrated their creative energies had been focused. And I respect the hell out of that endeavor. Though what do I know, they could have really given a shit about B-Movie Game for the Nintendo DS. I suppose that could have been their baby. B-Movie Game for the Nintendo DS. B-Movie Game for the Nintendo DS. B-Movie game.
There are a lot of reliable career paths. Indie development is not one of them. But so it has to be a passion.
That's the end of the video. Thanks for watching the video. If you liked the video, you can like it literally and can comment, subscribe. God damn it. Look, if you hear me like coughing a bunch in this video, I wasn't doing it on purpose. I just moved. I'm sick. I got no setup for recording here, so it sounds like I'm in a goddamn cathedral. Oh yeah, if you want to be nice to me, consider becoming a patron for however many kind of monies you want. If you do that, you get access to at least 2 videos that are only on Patreon. More to come on that front. And now that I'm moved and getting over being sick. What else? What else? Hey, here's something. You hear about this? Consider joining my Discord. Or follow me on shitty Twitter, formerly known as Less Shitty Twitter. So thanks again for watching. And an extra special thanks to Ailing Uncle, 2Password for Kids, Agendine, Alexander Smith, Anarcho Himbo, Andre Perkins, Aparts 89, Apex, Bayard Brown, Beef Lightning, Ben Carnell, Ben Oliver, Big Abuela Energy, Bindle, Black Pluto, Bolt Action Baja Blast, Close Quarter Wombat, Cole, D-Sky, Dante de Glanville, Daphne Pittendry, Dark Raptor 86, Darkside Blues, Deluminati, Der Capitan, The Real Michael King. Despite my own misgivings, I should feel proud of how far I've come and give myself a gentle but firm piss missile waxing. Dirt Person, Dr. Beard, DOS Days, Dubby, Dwellin' with Dar Hiraku, Edgy, Edward Avila, Fartmother, Gamma, Garbage Day, Grok, Gunmancer, Hadron Wolf, High Food Court, I Cook Bacon, Eudix Alexander, Jack the Dave, Jared Bynum, J. Alameen, Joseph Zanoni, Just Reshef, Carrot, Cafwin Amygdala, Conrad's Dilemma, Labor Delenda Est, Marcy Bones, Massimar, Michael Schmidt, Morg Detrius, Neckout the Brave, Octo, Ona Hill, Philip Woolley, Proto Pesnipe, Rahul Kirthi, Roland, Saiko Gekido, Salvatore Tosti, Samuel Vanderplatz, Schlangva, Slaurak, Snapplefish, Zofil Fucht, Zofil Abeglabe wo dem Wieden Grosshamentie, Solko, Stephen Kick, Sugar Boo, Tech923, Tessuyan, This Deal Is Getting Better All the Time, Two-Stan, Where Am I, Help, Witless Moth, Worm, Zach Bishop, Bort Loki, Claire Owen, Daniel Streb, El Jaguar, Eto, Ava Nerve, Giraffa. I'm really trying to think of a funny name involving goblins. Jeremy Silver, June Choi, Karen Rosenau, Catherine Graven, Lore, Lord Papula, Mr. Alpackelton, Savvy Fave, Swood Operator, T-Dog 8083, 410,757,800,000
164,530 gay cops, a hanging Chad, Albert Hunley, Alex Fisher, Alfred Correa, Aaron Says, Back to Bed, Bang Flang, Binary Vision, Brady the Sanity Tax Collector, Brozoof Jones, Cantankerous, Chimichanga Jones, Kodamite, Daddy Reznor, David Offord, Derforzi, Drunken Badger, Fiona Summers, Fix My Brain, Grounded Valkyrie, James Andrew Perla Adams, James Snipes, Jay Kenny, Jetsun Jampel, Nawang Lapsang Yeshe, Tenzin Gatso, J-Man DX, Larotica the News Elf, Mad Monty 98, Make It Raynor, Ophelia Fishwife, P. Dizzle, Persian Air. Please stop treating player agency as a negative. Leaning left-right manually isn't a fucking cover system, it's basic movement. Raul Garcia, Robert Brandon, Rowdy Roddy Peeper, Royale with Cheese, Samuel Ward, Sorry I'm No Hero, Technica, T. Stoney, 10-Beat, That Iru Guy Loves You, The Angry Pebble, The Condroid, The Plop Thickens, There Are Other Worlds Than This, Two Legs, A Big Gay Rat. Those two kind of complement each other. Ainsley Roth, Alistair Stewart, Alexander Olbrich, Alex F, Ali G, Alistair Grout, All the Nope, Andrew Light, Andrew Lubrano, Andy Krieger, Arbiter Numbers, Ashley Hillsman, Astro Shepherd, Atari Steed, Achella, Auspicious Whiskers, Axel, Babylon Broken, B-Top, Beef, Ben and Cara Dowling, Benjamin Payne, Best Tiger, Big Uggy Boy Dum Dum, Bishy 93, Biddles 9999999999999999999, Bivdub, Blake, Bohemian Nobody, Brams, Brandon Frost, Brett Weaver, Buckshot Papaya, Burps Wimbledon, Casey, Cerberus Arms, Colby, Colt of Leda, Daphne, David Fromke, David Harpstrite, Dazed Clockwork, Denny, Destrega, Divana Upperock, Dirty Space Rat, Do Vampire Cummies Taste Like Iron, Dog Vomit Slime Mold, Dongs.exe, real trio of horrors there. Dr. Grimbeard's Dino Nuggy Suppository Surprise, Eben Sullivan, Electric Crowbar, Ethan Blue, Eudiptes, Every Day, Once a Day, Give Yourself a Putty, Eyeballzilla, Flame 5029 Neo 8, Frank West's Flank Vest, Fried Potato, Frolics with Bunnies, Fuzzy Tingle Times, Game is Good, Game and Watching You, Gamerwood, General Clizara, Ghoul Baby Bond, Goofy Touched Me, Grimbeard Stole My Credit Card, Grimby's My Big Baby Boy, Haley Bobella, Hey Would Ya Blow Me, Hentai McToonboo, High Res Titan, Hime Rowan, Hitoshi-san. Hold on. Aren't those my shoes? Holy House Profane Void, Horror Show 93, Hugo Upton, Huron Lockhart, I Am Without Meaning, It Is Gilgamesh, Mightiest of Nappers, who Patreons through me. I fart on my hands. I swear I didn't make this just to sub to Grimbeard. INTJ loves her INTP. Irish Wristwatch. Irish Wristwatch. Irish Wristwatch. Jake Desi, James Kelly, Jamie Faulkner, Jared's sexy older brother. Jensen. Jeff Ladd, Jesse James, Joshua David, Justin Darnell, Captain Ketchup, Caragera, Kieran Walker, Kelly O'Neill, Kevin Hale, Kind Raccoon, Crust Easy, Kurok the Famished One, Lori Kubri, Leland Miliokis, Leopold Gloom, Legendary Dragon, M, Magic Meows, Mandalore Gaming, Mango Roxas, Marquois, Matthew St. J, Max Cohen, Miku, Miohong, Micah J. Best, Miles Phillips, More Sharks, Mother Destruction, Mr. Ducky Quack, Mystical Lint, Name Requires DLC. That's how I interpreted that as anime vocalizations. Nick Hill, Nick Hooper, Nick Timmons, Nikki Paradise, Nicholas Polestar, No Curly Fries in Hell, Noel M, Nuclear Sun, Noel Rom, Oliver Marshall, Opichi Kostra, Origami Zergling, Palanquin Noble, Paranoid Vampire, Parapug Deserves a Tiny Blanket, and Bruce's Thesis. Pathetically Hopeful, Paul Blart Mulgoth, Paul Fierce, Paul Sanford, Pazuzu, Philip Coffey, Picture, Projectile Jerkwagon, Radia, Replicant, Ruibisomen, Scofflaw, The Sussiest Baka D, Sentient Turtle, Serge Rom, Shadanon, Shade, Stilatixo, Soy Flowers, Spooky Schaefer, Startide, Timar, Tegan, The Supervisor, Thick Vormom, Tripwire, Tucker Donovan, Tutant Meanage Needle Teedle, Vincent Cronin, Wolf Chalice Logician, Woodjay, Zanga PF, Zdyanik Benez, Zen, Ziwawe, Zagingu, Zuli, The Little Blue Kobold, for being a patron, and the rest. Okay, I feel like I usually reserve this time to thank you again, but this time I mean it. I had to move very suddenly, and
I would be so utterly fucked as a person on this planet if it wasn't for your support. And I know it's not necessary, and it's like probably just cringe and annoying and frustrating if I apologize for like my production slowing down during that. But rest assured, I'm saying it for me. I will feel better saying it. So you can just tune it out. Sorry it's taken me so long. It was a weird place to be, like hitting 100K subs and then like being all out of whack with where I lived. When you're living the dream, sometimes that dream is sleep paralysis. And sometimes the Hat Man comes and you either gotta stare him down or you gotta get on your feet. Well, you can't because you're paralyzed. I have no gaming updates since I haven't been able to play a game. I've been moving and then I was like fever-ridden. Oh, I watched the Five Nights at Freddy's film. That's kind of tangentially game-related. And you know what? I gotta say, aside from one egregious YouTuber cameo, it's like pretty good. It's like a pretty good little movie. It's not like it's a effectively scary or complicated movie. It's just kind of like, hey man, scumbag, rat catcher, Kim, freak, tonight's the night. Press check, laser sight, your eyes are getting red. Bloodshot, you need your meds, your eyes are getting red. Bloodshot, you need your meds.
Nice peanuts. They smell good.